Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Are altcoins and Bitcoin experience a rally, or is this the start of a bullish trend? Scott Melker, crypto trader and investor, host of the Wolf of All Streets podcast and author of the Wolf Den newsletter, joins me to discuss. And Scott, before we get into, is this the bottom or a start of a bullish trend? Everyone's asking that question. I want to start with the news cycle. The crypto news cycle has been a little bit crazier than usual the past few weeks, particularly with 3AC. Do you think this is a systemic issue or specific to a handful of companies and their management teams?
Well, I think that it has been more systemic than expected. I think even last time we talked, maybe we discussed Luna and how it was so surprising that there had not been as much contagion, but I guess we just needed a bit of patience to see that actually play out. But obviously, I think in a market this small, a market this nascent, that when you have something that big, it causes sort of this cascade of after effects. And a lot of that has obviously been selling, right? We saw price go all the way down to 17,000, almost 500 at what was at least the local bottom last month. And I think a lot of that was just because of these forced liquidations of different institutions dealing with the problems related to 3AC and to Luna. So the good news is I believe that probably the largest part of that selling and that contagion is probably past. I think we will still sort of see a lot of different institutions and people still unwinding, but I think that now we're at a point where the market can absorb that.
Is there a bailout for those exposed to bankruptcy and insolvent crypto companies?
For the companies specifically, I think it's going to sort of depend on the bigger players in the space deciding who is worthy and I guess how it would serve probably their own interests to do so. I mean, we've obviously had Sam Bankman-Fried already bail out BlockFi, looked at least early like he was going to do so with Voyager, and there's some speculation that could still happen. And he even went on record as recently as today saying, hey, sometimes we're willing to do some bad deals if it helps the market as a whole, because obviously, A, that's good for the people, but B, it's good for the bottom line if the entire industry doesn't, go down the toilet. So I do think that there will be bailouts or partnerships or mergers and acquisitions or funding. What structure it comes in, I have no idea. My feeling is that a lot of these are filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy, probably to help woo some sort of suitor, get all of those liabilities and claims off the books and really start with a clean slate. So it's going to be interesting to see how a lot of this plays out.
And how excited are you about the move in Bitcoin over the past couple of days? Is this a relief rally or the start of a new bullish trend? Because Scott, I look at, everyone posts their charts on Twitter. Someone says it's going to 10,000. The other one's saying it's going to 69,000. It's like they draw lines in different ways and come up with different scenarios, I'm sure, to justify their positions. But how do you feel when you look at it purely through a technical lens?
Well, looking at it purely through a technical lens, I believed that 17,500 is the bottom. But then again, I also believe that 28,000 was the bottom when we were trading around those areas not so many months ago. So obviously, we're all just speculating and nobody has a crystal ball. Now, what I will say is that there are certain lines on charts that a lot of people use, at least for mean reversion or for major trend moves. And we have the 200 MA on the weekly chart sitting right around 22,400, 22,500. Price had never traded below it for more than a day or two, actually. Even in the March 2020 crash, we had a weekly close below, and then the next week pumped and above, and it never went below. But we're on the 6th week right now. At current, actually, we're trading above it. But 5 weeks we've had close, and this is the 6th week that saw price action below that 200 MA on the weekly. So really an important line, I guess, at this point, right in the mid 22,000s, depending on what exchange or chart you look at, that we want to see a weekly close above. So it doesn't really matter that the price right now is above 23,000. It matters what happens on Sunday, at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or whenever the candle closes.
And Scott, I want to shift gears a bit here and talk about more technology versus the value of coins. You had a very insightful guest on your show about the Innovators Dilemma coming to Wall Street and what it means for this technology to be adopted, scale, as well as mass adoption. Tell us more about your guest and what his key point was here.
I believe that was Mike Belshie. And we're talking about a guy with decades and decades of history of being one of the greatest innovators on the planet. But the idea, obviously, is that the innovator's dilemma is that you get to a certain point with your company that you basically, I guess the best idiom for it is it takes a very long time to turn an aircraft carrier, right? So by the time you need to pivot and sort of change direction or adopt a new technology, you're way too big to do that. And we've seen that obviously with a number of companies. If you go back 10, 20 years and look at the biggest companies by market cap in the world, well, most of those are gone, right? They've been replaced by technology companies. His argument obviously was that Wall Street is the same. They're using old technology from the 1970s, the 1980s, to transact, to clear. Obviously, 48-hour clearing in stocks is insane when you see what can happen when you tokenize things. But so his argument basically is that they now have a dilemma on Wall Street as to how they proceed technologically with advancements. Do they adopt crypto? Do they come up with their own? Do they use the existing ones? Or do they try to be dismissive of it altogether and get left behind? So the idea being that technology is inevitable. We know that that everything is eventually going to change when there's a better system. The question is Wall Street too big now to ever be able to really adapt that, or will they just get passed by what's being built in DeFi and in crypto in general?
All right, Scott, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.